This is TrineDay's Roundtable 21. How can the Earth belong to everyone? It's a lot easier than you think. I am Bruce Taurus. I moderate, and after our presentations, we'll have questions and answers. Paul Fitzgerald and Elizabeth Gould, husband and wife, writers and journalists, have written a proposal for world peace based on economic justice. It can be found online at valediction.net. Look for world peace in the banner. And Alanna Hartzok is an Earth rights visionary whose book, The Earth Belongs to Everyone, is a free PDF available at theiu.org, the International Union for Land Value Taxation. That's theiu.org. Look for resources along the top and then click down onto books and you'll find Alanna's book. But first, our host, who has published over 160 books in the past 20 years, books that question our official history and challenge us with truths we can't find anywhere else, Kris Millegan.
Howdy, all, and again, thanks for spending some time here discussing the world's problems. You know, we're gonna solve it all, right? You know, I've written about some things, and I've been working on a book that I called Priests and Pirates. Okay, because there are people that have bamboozled us. And, you know, I was thinking the other day, and actually I'm going to add another P to that. It's going to be priests, pirates, and politicians, okay, that have, you know, used their power to, again, befuddle us and move us into directions that are profitable for them, but not good for the planet and for the people. Okay, and one thing that we've been doing here, we've been discussing Henry George, okay, who was very well known in this country at one time, but the quote unquote powers that be says, well, I think we ought to bury all this, okay? But, you know, well, I'm a Hindi, and so, or I'm a bunch of things, but I believe in the Hindi and reincarnation. So this thing is just kind of, you know, popping up again, okay? And, you know, it is very interesting. We send out notices about this, and one of them we send to our email list or publicity list that we have here at TrineDay. And one of those people is Michael Savage out there. And he responded back. He says, a bunch of Marcus dribble from a bunch of nobodies, okay? And as, you know, the Georgists know, I mean, that's what they say. Oh, you're just a bunch of commies. You're just a bunch of commies. Okay. And, you know, the other thing I want to mention here before we get on with the discussion is that, boy, I tell you, I get a lot of spam in my email account these days. And a lot of it is, you know, mis and disinformation, trying to send stuff to radicalize you on one thing or another. So just be very, very careful out there, because we're getting so much mis and disinformation. It's just beyond the pale. And so, again, I really appreciate everybody coming and spending time trying to make a better world, you know, for our children, because what more can we do? Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Kris. Paul and Liz.
Well, we are very excited to report. It's been quite a while since we've been able to really bring our original story into the discussion, which was creating world peace based on JFK's peace plan that he delivered at American University. Actually, I think we just passed the 60th anniversary. And it turned out that Ed Dodson of the Henry School of Social Science and host of Smart Talk did some research recently and sent it to us. And it turns out that JFK's grandfather, Honey Fitzgerald, who was the mayor of Boston from 1906 to 08 and 1910 to 14, apparently was a Georgist. And we now have documentation from a weekly magazine called The Public that was published between 1898 in 1919. And in this document are a number of articles that refer to Honey Fitz's efforts to try and get land value taxes going in Boston, and his work with the governor, and it's quite detailed. And there's other things that we hope to find. We hope to find a lot more. But I think what's really important about this, it turns out that this is also the relative who met Paul's grandfather. And this is the one who he sat down with, and they decided that they were related. So it's very exciting to be able to bring this surprise of all surprises. And Paul is actually going to read you from the article that Ed found for us.
1911, the unearned increment movement in Boston. The mayor of Boston, John F. Fitzgerald, has not receded from his agitation for the taxation of, quote, unearned increment of land, but appears from the Boston papers to be pushing it with more vigor and better understanding than ever. He has recently sent to Governor Foss a proposed legislative resolution, which, if adopted, would be the most advanced step in the East, with high official sanction in the direction of land value taxation, and probably the most advanced anywhere in the United States outside of Oregon. Resolved that the governor, with the advice and public consent of the council, be authorized to appoint a commission of 5 persons, citizens of the Commonwealth, one of whom shall be designated as chairman for the purpose of investigating the present laws relating to taxation of real estate, with a view of changing them so as to permit the taxation of the unearned increment of real estate. The commission shall investigate the laws and systems in regard to such taxation in operation in other states and countries, shall correspond to confer with committees and commissions in other countries considering the same subject, and shall draft an act for the taxation of such unearned increment. The commission shall be provided with suitable quarters in the State House or elsewhere. It may employ all necessary clerical or other assistance, and may incur other reasonable expense, and shall receive such remuneration as may be approved by the governor and council. The commission shall report in print the draft of the act and the compilation of the data and statistics and such other information as the commission may be possessed of as a result of its investigation and study on or before the second Wednesday in January in the year 1912. And the powers of said commission shall terminate on that date. The total expense to be incurred under this resolve shall not exceed the sum of $10,000. In transmitting the above resolution to the governor, Mayor Fitzgerald explained it with a letter of transmittal in which he said, "I desire to call your attention to the pressing necessity of adjusting our tax system so as to permit the taxation of the unearned increment of real estate in our cities and large manufacturing towns. In many places, farms and uncultivated areas of comparatively valueless land have increased in value 1,000-fold during the last 50 years, and the former owners or their descendants have become immensely wealthy without any exertion of their part. I do not allude to land speculation where not infrequently it happens that great stretches of land are opened by such speculation, and the promoter must be admitted to have contributed greatly toward the rise in value. But in the cases I have in mind, the great rise in value of land, especially in cities, is not brought about by the owner and is quite unearned by him. It is society which brings about through its activities and at its costs, whereas the existing land system causes the gain to inure entirely to the owners and not to the community. Not only would the taxation of this unearned increment add considerably to the revenue of our growing cities and towns, but it would be a step toward the attainment of justice in taxation. Almost everyone admits the justice and desirability of so taxing this unearned increment that a portion at least of it shall go to the community whose industry, skill, and labor have caused this increase. Noting then in this letter to the constitutional difficulties in the way of making such taxes proportional, Mayor Fitzgerald enumerates suggested plans as follows in substance. 1. Deduct from the price of actual sales the cost of improvements and of public betterments paid before since the previous sale, also the price of previous sale, and if the remainder exceeds 5% of the former price, impose upon it a special transfer tax. 2, value real estate decennially, and after deducting cost of improvements and betterments, levy a tax upon so much of the increase as exceeds 10% of the previous valuation. 3, if the rent increases in the decennial period more than 10% above a fair return on cost of improvements, tax the increase. Mayor Fitzgerald notes as follows the objections to each of these 3 plans. The tax on transfers or sales would not affect the estates, which are not sold and which have been held by the same family or by land trusts for many years and are not in the market. As far as the valuations are concerned, the judgment of the valuers, like that of the Board of Assessors, would be fallible. And as to the third, it would not apply to unimproved real estate. The Fells Single Tax Tour. Pursuing his journey with Daniel Kiefer in behalf of the Henry George movement for the taxation of land value, Joseph Fells has spoken at Stanford University and at latest reports in Southern California. He arrived in Pasadena on the 9th, speaking that evening to Throop Institute. In the next evening at the Hebrew Temple, he spoke to a large audience at the club, City Club in Los Angeles on the 11th. It was here that in direct answer to a question, Mr. Fells is reported by the Los Angeles Herald as saying, "No man of wealth can use his wealth to better advantage than by helping to wipe out all taxation on industry and everything created by labor and placing taxation where it rightly belongs, on land values entirely separate from personal property and buildings created by labor." Going to San Diego on the 12th, Mr. Fells got mixed up in highly sensational but wholly credible fashion, there with a local referendum over a traction question which came to vote on the 14th. The referendum was for an alteration in the city charter so as to take away people's power over the traction company for 50 years. It had been urged in behalf of the company that a 50-year franchise was necessary in order to finance extensions, whereupon Mr. Fells offered to buy it at its physical value on a 25-year franchise in the same terms as the franchisees are held by the company, and to pay the city 2% of gross receipts. Also, that the city of San Diego may at any time take over all the lines and property for municipal operation on paying the value of the physical property then in use.
Well, and I think this is something that we hope to get out to all presidential candidates so they can be reminded that this is an issue that was embraced by many Americans, even in the 20th century.
Fabulous. Alanna, you are up, my dear. Alanna Hartzok, Earth.
Wonderful convivial
Yes.
conversation where I get the screen share up. Thank you, Paul and Liz. This is really important and significant about Honey Fitzgerald, that 100 years ago, I think, or so, mayor. Now, what would Bobby Kennedy be? The grandson of this man? Is Bobby Kennedy Jr.
Great. No, he was the grandfather of JFK.
So Bobby is.
Yeah, he'd be the great grandfather.
Yeah.
So, oh,
Well,
good.
you-
And
you
her
have to-
Emma just came in
if
from
you make
Ireland.
Yeah,
Yeah,
What?
hi.
Hi.
good to
Emma.
see you here. And-
He's a strong land rights, land tax, and monetary policy organizer in Ireland. The campaign manager for Bobby Kennedy's presidential race is Dennis Kucinich. And Dennis knows and is very positive on Henry George and the land value tax.
Mhm.
Get
And
it
with
to
this
you.
information about Honey Fitzgerald, the great grandfather,
Yeah.
I think it says Kris is host now. I think that, I mean, I just feel in my bones that when we get this information to Bobby Kennedy, he's going to go for it.
And I read the piece he wrote, the article. He understood it very well.
I know.
You know,
that's part of
he
what's
was
so-
able to articulate it and
Yeah.
critique other critiques.
Exactly.
So-
Yeah.
Can everybody see the screen that says TrineDay Roundtable 21, how the earth belongs to
Yes.
everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, yes. First, thank you all for being present. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. We're moving together on this beautiful way forward, learning and educating. So of all the world problems, I picked just one at the moment. It's a UN report, 122 million pushed into hunger since 2019. 5 UN agencies, the climate emergency, armed conflicts, the COVID pandemic are seen pushing the global goal of eradicating hunger further out of reach. So we know it's serious on every front that we look at. By reducing our reliance on chemical fertilizers, policymakers could turn the food crisis into a genuine opportunity towards shifting subsidies away from agribusiness-led to agroecological-led farming systems and a managed transition to healthy, sustainable patterns of production. From Analysis News, people are looking for a truly new approach to solving the human enigma of rags and riches and a world of abundance. Do you recall Henry George's masterwork was Progress and Poverty, Economics and Ethics, the choices that will encourage initiative, eliminate poverty and pollution, and provide a sustainable future. The earth as the birthright of all people is a paramount human right that we must now affirm. The earth's vast lands and natural resources must not only be carefully stewarded, but also fairly shared. It's time to replace welfare with earth share. Now, this is from, you'll see the link, Cooperative Individualism, which we also have the document that Paul just read, and that's Ed Dodson's magnificent archives of 150 years of this movement, and it's a worldwide archive, very impressive. This happens to be an article that I co-authored with John McConnell, who was the founder of the original Earth Day, which was for the equinox, the March equinox, and had as the economics of peace, Henry George economics. With the ringing of the peace bell every year for the past 50 years at the United Nations, the Earth Society Foundation has kept the Equinox Earth Day alive, but they have not brought forward the economics of peace, the Georgist economics of John McConnell. We are doing that for 2024, and you're going to hear more about that in upcoming roundtables. So, little quick economics lesson here to make amends to the terrible corruption that's happened in economics. So the 3 main factors are
Labor, physical and mental, land, including the gifts of nature, which yields capital, tools, the things we use.
Basic needs can be met with minimum capital. Okay, we're not talking money capital here. We're not talking finance capital. Just if I have access to land, I can use a shovel, a rake, and a hoe. That's my capital, and I can grow my food. And so can pretty much anybody else, most anywhere else on the planet. So the only reason for hunger and starvation is clearly lack of access to Mother Earth. So these classical economics terms, which I said are land, labor, and capital, and under the corruption of economics, the neoliberal economics made land, which is the term for all of nature, the whole earth, land. They actually put that under the term capital and made 2-factor economics only, labor and capital. And that was funded, thank you very much, by the robber barons who saw that the Georgist economics, which is an extension of classical economics to really focus on the land problem, they saw it was a growing popular movement. They were threatened. So they put their money behind corrupting the field of economics. So these couple of slides, we're bringing back the original land, labor, capital. Now, these are the terms that are used to describe who gets the return to land, labor, capital. So wages is an easy term. It's your labor. Interest, and again, not financial interest, but if I put together wood and metal and I made a shovel, I could loan that out for a fee, and that would be my interest. Some people might rather buy or borrow or loan a shovel than have to make their own. So this is interest on actual physical capital. Now, rent is a very, very important concept. It's not your apartment rent. This is the economic rent or the land rent. It's an unearned income that's currently vastly a source of profit for the few as opposed to many. Rent is the return to those who own the land and natural resources of the planet. Those who hold title, those who, whatever fashion or other, maintain control and can charge to the user of land the rent. So this is unearned, and we're talking about this is a value created by society, by the community as a whole. It's a natural commons. So we're about collecting the commons rent for the people, as you'll see as we go along. This is a really important visual. Books could be written on this visual. I hope to make a real important point with this, put together by Australian colleagues. This is Australia throughout over 100 years. They do it at different periods, but this is 1911 to 2010. So on the left, 1911, you have an earlier, less developed economy in Australia. By 1910, you have more like an economy like we all have now under population increase in the development. But looking now back at 1911, the blue is the return to labor and capital. You'll see it's 85%, pretty high. The the gray is that bit of the unearned income, the land rent, that's privatized. The pink is the taxes. And now you're going to follow that little red ribbon. We want to expand that red ribbon. That was a little bit of the commons rent collected by public bodies. So now we're going to look at how it goes forward as population and inventions and technology and new schools and libraries and infrastructure and all this happens under development. We're going to see how the wealth distributed. So look at the blue, 85% to labor and production, down to 48%. Wow, what a drop. You wonder why your wages are not going as far as they used to. We'll notice the pink, which is taxes, 6% up to 24%, and some places higher. Great increase on taxes, which is falling mostly on labor and production. The little red ribbon, there's a little bit of increase there, not a lot. That's what we want. We want the commons rent collected for the common good, but that didn't change much. And then you'll see the gray, which is the privatized land rent. That means the few who own the land and resources getting the unearned income went from 8% to 26%. So we're looking at these proportions worldwide now. And when we shift the tax base from labor and production, we shift it onto the commons rent. It looks like the commons rent that should be captured for the public good. And we really, really don't need to tax labor and production, in which case wages are going to be much higher naturally. There's no big call that it's inflationary. So hidden taxable capacity of land, enough and to spare. One of our now deceased, but he lived a good long life, Dr. Mason Gaffney. He's a co-author of the important book, Corruption of Economics, UC Riverside, has identified how conventional data relied upon by most economists hides or understates land values and land rent, giving the false impression that this tax capacity is low. Another one of these shell games that neoliberal economists put out is talk about fake data and false information. So he's clarified that it's more and then enough to fund public goods from land rent only. Well, he described 16 elements of land's taxable capacity that are either trivialized or omitted from the National Income and Products Account and other data resources that NEPA account used to track and keep records on what we're talking about. Okay, I got to admit, Dean Goodman. So no longer, they're hiding it again. So any one of these 16 elements indicates a much higher land tax base than economists commonly recognize today. Keepers of the national accounts keep deluding us that land rent and land value are trivial. Not only is the potential public revenue from surface land rent significant as an amount, the incentive effects are impressive. For example, when surface land rent is collected for social benefit, land is freed from socially harmful incentives for profiteering and land speculation, and thus maintains affordability. Affordable land means more people can access land upon which to labor, build their homes, businesses, grow food, secure energy from solar, wind, and wood. When land costs are lowered and remain stable, more funding is freed for capitalization, cooperatives, community corporations, or individual family-owned businesses. More benefits of collecting the commons land rent while untaxing the production. Lower land costs mean lower mortgage payments as well. Land rent's a substantial sum that can pay for public infrastructure, education, health care, and other social goods. Urban land sites are better utilized, so sprawl is curtailed because this public finance approach encourages infill development, not these vacant, underutilized, boarded up building sites, and then the consequent sprawl when the cities deteriorate. There's no trade-offs, it's beyond the old left and the old right. We can build a system of public finance that will strengthen and maximize incentives for sustainable development goals by sharing the value of commons rent while reducing or eliminating, again, taxes on labor and created wealth. We can build a system of public finance that will strengthen and maximize incentives. And I like to say, this is how you hatch many birds out of one egg. So this is all going to contribute to efficient wealth production, provision of adequate government services, and voila, which is why we're all so interested in economics of peace, peaceful resolution of territorial conflicts. Great article came out today by I think CIA guy on one of my lists that I enrolled to, saying, oh my gosh, just showing that Ukraine is the fourth wealthiest natural resource country in the world, rare earth minerals, and then the rich agricultural land. So if you scratch any conflict, any war, you're going to find it's over land and resources. So those are the 5 areas that this is going to better. So, and we want to share these commons rent, which is an unearned income from the surface land sites based on land value. There we can get to work in our towns and cities, and we have a number of projects, and we'd like others to start projects. The commons rent from oil and minerals, from water, from farm, timber, and grazing land, from the electromagnetic spectrum. Why are we giving the spectrum away to a few media companies? There's high land rent. Geo-orbital zones. That's where satellites can hang in balance in outer space between the gravitational pulls of Moon and Earth. So these L5 or geo-orbital zones are very high real estate values in outer space that should be tapped. There should be rent charged for those. We need a global resource agency to do that, while reducing or eliminating taxes on labor-created wealth. So reduce or ideally eliminate the income tax, which came in when 1913, when we brought in another bad institution, which is the Federal Reserve Bank and the bad bankster problem. But we're focused on the land problem. So we want to get the income tax from wages, especially in payroll, off. We want to get legitimate capital, tools, machines, especially of sustainable quality, untaxed. Sales, especially sales for basic necessities, places that are taxing food, bad. Homes are houses and other buildings. You want to make an improvement to your house right now, along comes the tax assessor is going to increase your property tax. Take the tax off our houses and other buildings. So a nice little slogan is tax bads, not goods. Tax the commons, misspelling, commons rent and untaxed production. Pay for what you take, rent, taxes to society, pay for what you take from the earth, not for what you make with your work. Now, this could be a whole book. It's subsidy reform. Stop giving tax dollars to oil and other corporations or giving them these humongous tax breaks. And what is it like? 3/4, probably more, corporations are not even paying any taxes. The wealthiest ones are collecting the unearned income of the rent. The earth belongs to everyone. The claim by birthright can only be legitimate if it is acknowledged that all other human beings have an equal claim to land and natural resources. The deepest ethical dimension of territorial rights recognizes that humanity is one and indivisible in its fundamental claim to the earth as a birthright of all. I'm going to give a few very quick examples of how this policy has been or is being implemented. One I love is the California irrigation districts under the Wright Act. It was a school teacher who got to be a state legislator who understood Georgia's economics, got this going. After one California rancher who owned 1 million acres of land won full rights to the water of the Kern River in 1886. Well, people thought that's not fair. So citizens organized and the Wright Act was legislated, which permitted local irrigation districts to build dams and canals, other infrastructure for, well, irrigation, to be funded by bonds that would be paid off by land rent. Now you're going to increase the land value when you put in this infrastructure. So the increase in land value would be tapped to pay for the bonds, the loans that were made to install the infrastructure. Perfect example of how we want to build infrastructure. Whatever we need in infrastructure should be paid off by the increase in the land rent. Otherwise, infrastructure increases land value and the unearned income goes to the landlord, landowner, corporation that owns the land. This went along very well. The land reform, I think there's one more slide on this. For 10 years, the Central Valley was transformed into over 7,000 independent farms. The Wright Act was amended to mandate the total exemption of improvements from the tax base. Irrigation districts included in taxed land that was used not only for farming, but also for, then it expanded, residents and commerce within townships, because these communities were growing. They've been studied. These communities compared to the corporate agribusiness communities, these are healthier, diversified, much better places to live than the corporate farming area. And this is what drove it. So steadily the irrigation districts evolved to provide reclamation, recreation, electric power. So these formerly semi-arid plains of the San Joaquin Valley became the breadbasket of America, one of the most productive areas on the planet. Why haven't we all heard about this? Why hasn't this taken off worldwide? Well, short story is the first lien on the land, if you couldn't pay your land rent, your land reverted to the community. Often, like in traditional indigenous cultures, if your land wasn't being used, wasn't serving the community as a whole, it would be redistributed to others in the community who would use it well. So the first lien on the land went to the local community. The second lien went to any mortgage you had from the bank. Well, who would not like that? Can you say Bank of America, Rockefeller Bank, elite banks, which took this policy to the Supreme Court, and I think it was the third time they managed to completely destroy the Wright Act. And so you have irrigation districts throughout, irrigation projects, irrigation itself paid for by taxing we the people on our labor income. It's federally transferring our tax dollars to agribusiness to subsidize agribusiness. So a big crime, another one of these big economic crimes. Another reason why we really also need to see this two-pronged approach, which also has a focus on how we have interest-free banking, public banks. Ellen Brown's work in the Public Banking Institute, Web of Debt, her books, and Carol Brulette's on the phone. She's looked at alternative on the Zoom. She's looked deeply for years into alternative currencies. So these land reform and the money reform should really be going nicely hand in hand, but they're not yet. These movements need to come together and be seen as part and parcel of the thousands-year studied perennial wisdom teachings of Jubilee justice to make sure the land and money system's established. I only have a couple more slides. Another example is the Alaska Permanent Fund, the Alaska model. So Alaska State says that these mineral resources are commons and should be used for the benefit of all the people. So the governor and the governance system, with a lot of public input, established the permanent fund to collect substantial oil rent, oil profits from the oil corporations. and they put it into a investment portfolio. From the interest from the investment, they average that off over every 3 years of the investment portfolio. And then they issue in October a check to every resident of Alaska, including children who've lived there for 1 year. That's the only requirement. You live in Alaska for 1 year. They've done this for almost 40 years. You can go into the Alaska Permanent Fund dividend program. You can calculate exactly how much dividend you're going to get. Year 2022, each person in Alaska received over $3,200. So you can see that for a family of 4, that's $13,000. They're taught that this is yours by right of ownership of the resources of Alaska. This is yours by birthright. Okay. So in other words, you can establish these dividend funds and or make sure the governance is collecting for public goods, the dividend, the land rent. So only one on this, but we could go into all these several cities in Pennsylvania where I live. 20 cities at that time, and the US state of Pennsylvania have been gradually shifting their taxes off homes and other buildings and onto the land rent. This is a property tax reform. Although citizens still must pay state and federal income taxes, this split rate or 2-tier approach has proven benefits. Allentown, our 3rd largest city, the people voted this in. Harrisburg, our state capital, was the 2nd most distressed city in the United States in the end of the 1970s. They were desperate. Mayor Reed started bringing this in over a few years. A city of 50,000 went from 4,000 boarded up buildings to less than 400, decreased crime rate, decreased arson. People in the newspapers were writing, we don't know how mayor is doing this, but we have more public funds for parks and other services. The average homeowner was paying less. What was the magic of this benefit? And Harrisburg went from the 2nd worst city, only East St. Louis was worse in the United States, to a city that was now winning a number of awards. So we have enough practical, and I could mention other countries and cities in the world. This works. This is a practical, we know how to do it now. So you are hereby invited to launch Earth Rights projects where you live. You can contact me. I just started a new email called earthrightsprojects@gmail.com. There's my phone number. You can call me anytime between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Please become a member of your regional chapter of Common Ground USA. There's that website. Sign up for the IU View, the newsletter of the International Union for Land Value Tax at the IU.org. And again, Wendy Rockwell, interesting family ancestry of this policy, by the way. She's in Costa Rica. She's the current president of our IU. And you can get, as Bruce mentioned earlier, a free PDF of my book, The Earth Belongs to Everyone, at the IU.org books. Now, we're going to have questions and comments, but before we open it up, we have a respondent. And get ready to go now. Vanessa Beck, she is our coordinator for our Baltimore Thrive Land Value Tax Implementation Project. She's been at that for more than a year. She has like 7 or 8 of us bossing her around, but she does very well with it because the team includes a number of our policy experts who are happy to work with you in your communities as well. We're working with state legislative efforts. We are educating public at large, social justice groups, and so on. And she's a jewel. Vanessa is a jewel. I started engaging with her just by an email group online and found out she lived in Baltimore. And then after we were going to have her be our coordinator, wouldn't you know, she had lived in Chicago and actually taken a course at the Henry George School in Chicago. So she was the needle in the haystack that we found. So Vanessa, are you ready? I'm going to stop the share here.
Hi, thank you for that very lovely introduction, and also I thank you for both presentations, Alanna and Paul and Liz. One thing that this kind of made me think about is mortgages. How they in my lifetime, they just seem to be considered, what you do in order to own a home. And I'm curious, was there ever a movement against this, like whether, popular or maybe amongst Georgists or whatever groups that would consider mortgages kind of cruel and immoral, to hold debt over someone's head just so that they can have a roof over their head. A lot of these topics, like I tend to like to zoom out a lot. And so poverty, we know, is highly connected to land and resource theft, right? An organization like the UN, which is really increasing in its effective power, as well as, I would say, its influence on what people think, what people believe, what people are focused on, including what governments think, believe, are focused on, local governmental agencies are focused on. And it concerns me that individuals, local and national governments, are increasingly losing their freedom and power to make decisions about their own communities. I think Alanna mentioned, stop giving tax money, which is public money, our money, to oil companies and other exploiters. But I don't know if people are aware of basically the merging between the World Economic Foundation and the UN. In 2019, there was a partnership signed between those two groups, and there was actually pushback by I believe it was over 400 different organizations around the world, who felt that the UN was already under heavy corporate control, but like with the signing of this agreement, it would be official and increased. Many of the corporations who are part of the World Economic Foundation and
Forum.
push these supposed sustainable development goals are the very companies responsible for resource theft and pollution. Like there's Coca-Cola, Amazon, Nestle, ExxonMobil, Palantir, Lockheed Martin. Centralized globalist corporate control, and instead of the will of individuals and even governments. Though I still have hope for for the local and these projects that sometimes I look at as being able to sneak through. And thank you for having me.
Well, thanks, Vanessa, for your very astute and important comments and concerns and considerations worthy of a very extended dialogue. But I'd like to turn it now to Bruce in his role as moderator for the remainder and for questions and answers and comments.
Yeah, and folks can put a question or your name in the chat, or you could raise the little yellow hand or flag like this. And I'll just ask a quick question, Alanna. What do you say to someone learning about these economics for the first time and they say, well, isn't my land already taxed with my property tax if I'm a homeowner?
Oh, well, yeah, that's a brilliant and important one. So what we explain is that the property tax is two taxes in one, and it's upside down tax. It's a tax on your house, which we want to say, this is your private property. You've paid for it. Maybe you build it with your own hands, but this is your labor-owned house. Don't tax labor. Again, don't tax production. Don't tax what we need, which is housing, a place to live. So with this property tax, it's currently in most places, it's taxing the building much more than the land value. So the land value, therefore, the land keeps being speculated upon, hoarded, and so on. And the current property tax, actually, the incentive is like where we're looking, and Vanessa's coordinating a program in Baltimore, but any major city, you're seeing why are there boarded up buildings and why there's homeless people. What's wrong with the market? Well, this is what's wrong with the market. We're treating the land as a market commodity for buying and selling and profiteering. The land is a commons. It should be held in what Ralph Bersodi and Schools Living Community Land Trust. It's a trust. It's a trusteeship. And so for your use rights of our commons trust, you pay a fee just for the value of the land. And that is the good part of the tax, of the property tax we want to keep. That's the commons rent on land value. So properly configured, because homeowners are pretty important politically. They're voters more than renters are. We show how homeowners pay less under this. And if they fix up their house or add another room, they're not going to be taxed more. And so, Bruce, that's how in our city of Allentown, when enough homeowners and others who live there understood how this works, that's how they came to vote for it.
How
And
much
they
less?
voted-
Is there an average of how much less?
Oh, well, I can't give you an average. I don't think that would be quite fair or accurate.
Right,
But what
right.
we do is be able to view the land value mapping system and so on. We can go in parcel by parcel and tell any person how much less, or in a few rare cases more, if you have a high land value per building for housing. But we can tell you exactly how much you're going to pay under varying degrees of the shift. So the brilliance of what we have in information technology to move this forward cannot be overstated.
Liz, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to contribute to what Alanna's saying. I really do want to bring back, though, a focus on Honey Fitzgerald, because this idea of really trying to get this discussion into the presidential election, I think, is a serious opportunity that we have. I think that we have also noticed that I think we're talking about the fact that right now Detroit and Michigan are focusing on transferring over to land value tax. So we have some activity going on, and far more people are becoming aware of it. It's getting out. And what I think, though, this thing with Honey Fitz being JFK's grandfather, I mean, we've got to be able to do something with that. I mean, the guy was so articulate. And I have a feeling if Ed continues his research, maybe he's going to be unearthing a few more articles, a few more words. I mean, the one article that Paul read, I think, is sufficient because it very clearly articulates how much he understood what he was talking about. And I think coming from him, there's a lot of people who will take notice of that may be coming from someone who is just an average person. I mean, you're talking about a historical figure connected to JFK. So we've got some leverage here. And I think we really have to think about that possibility of tying together not only the power of JFK and his peace plan, but really now the power of JFK's grandfather, and the basis of world peace being economic justice that can't get here until we begin to, make more of these changes.
Thank you, Liz. Carol, you put in the chat an article at Unlimited Hangout. Do you want to jump on and explain it to us, please?
So Whitney Webb details the creation of a new financial asset class, which is a new corporate structure to help monetize nature. And it's like the biggest land grab that is in existence, to expand the monetary supply and also to monetize nature for profit. I mean, that's the express purpose. It's not to preserve nature, enhance nature in any way. It's just a complete power grab and a way of taking over the natural world. And then just a few months after that, there was a big meeting with the G7 and looking at a new refinancialization, a restructuring of the financial system. But this key component is to monetize all of nature, and it's the exact opposite of what Henry George was looking at. And it's being done under sort of the fluffy rhetoric disguise of the World Economic Forum's Great Reset But it is a promise that they are trying to deprive everyone of everything so that we'll owe nothing and be happy. But I think we should be aware of that. And the danger right now that I see is that they've created platforms in all these countries to help facilitate this takeover. And what it would mean too is they would put the land in some kind of structure so that it couldn't experience the kind of Henry George land value taxation, and exempt it and remove it. And it would also reduce the availability of land for people. So that's something everyone should be aware of. Check out the
You know
articles.
what we're up against, and if I would interject, Carol, Carol lives in a high land value area. Could you just say a moment about Palo Alto and Silicon Valley housing costs?
Oh, it's terrible. I mean, we've actually been renting the same place for over 30 years, and it's increased almost 10 times in value. And it's just a dinky little track home that's falling apart. I mean, it's actually worse than when we moved in, but now it's worth millions and millions of dollars. It's ridiculous, but it's all in the land. It's all in the land, and the fact that we have Google, Facebook, Lockheed Martin, all those black budget intelligence agencies surrounding us. So you have people with astronomical salaries. But it's a challenging environment to live in.
Vanessa, you put an article here and you say on the UN's partnership with the World Economic Forum, and this includes the link to the open letter in opposition. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, there were hundreds and hundreds of organizations across the world who came out in opposition of this further corporate ship of the UN when they decided to embark upon this partnership, because it was one of these conflicts of interest. Like you have, when you look at the FDA, for example, a captured organization where the very companies they're supposed to regulate are giving them money. And so with this partnership between the World Economic Forum and the UN, again, you've got these private industries, weapons companies, oil companies who are basically calling the shots. So there was a lot of pushback against that, but very, very little media. I didn't even learn about it until probably a year after it occurred.
Just a little history here. Henry George came out with his book in 1879. Okay. Now by 1886, that guy in California was going with it. So, I mean, it really caught the country by storm. And, he was the second most speaker there next to Mark Twain. Okay. And it's very interesting. In 1886, the same year that gentleman in California started gathering the water, was the issue of a order from the Supreme Court that recognized corporations as people. Okay. And the powers that be have been using that order, okay, to again subvert the natural order and create this, corporate or false, order to control us. Okay. And it's very interesting that the Supreme Court judge at that time was a member of the Order of Skull and Bones, because again, they have used this secrecy of these things for corruption. Okay. For, corrupting our economic system and for, corrupting our governmental system. There's a lot on our plate that we need to do.
Absolutely. Duncan, if you'll unmute, and then John Olson will be next. Hi, Duncan.
We bought the farm that we now live on, and I'm sitting on, 30 years ago it's now worth at least £4 million. That's 30 years ago. It's worth probably between £4 and £5 million more than it was when we bought it. And I have people telling me how fortunate I was to have such a cheap farm, as they call it. But I say that was the correct price, and it probably still is the correct price, because the current market price for land is far way above what anybody could justify paying for farming it. And in terms of, it's even risen more in the last 12 months since the urge for polluting companies to be buying carbon credits on farmland, which they think they can plant trees on, and land which is marginal, the number of livestock we can keep between 1 and 2 cows per acre. There are areas in Scotland where you would need 50 acres to keep 1 cow. But the price of that land has gone up to about half the price of good agricultural land, simply because speculators are moving in to buy it, thinking that there's going to be a market for carbon credits that they can get rich on in the future. Another thing which has happened here is that there's been a big, as you know, the UK is in some financial difficulties because the health and care welfare system is very much short of cash. And so there are rumours that the government is going to increase the taxes, inheritance tax. And there's been an outcry by those people like me who bought property 30 or 40 years ago, and it's increased by a factor of 3 or 4 up to 10, and they're screaming because they don't want to be paying anything of that to the government in taxation. And the government is aware that the losers in this, if they do impose an inheritance tax and collect some of this unearned increment in property prices, the property owners will declare that they are losing money because the value of their land on which their houses stand will fall.
Duncan, is that the gist of what you wanted to share with
Yes.
us?
Yes,
Alanna,
I
do you
think how do we overcome that sort of antagonism?
Alanna, what do you say to that?
You know, Henry George once said, with correct thought, right action will follow. So it's essential that we build a significant movement of people who understand enough about the fundamentals that they'll do something.
Right.
All that it takes for evil to prevail is enough good people do nothing. We the leaders, we were informed and enlightened about this now. You've been working hard, Duncan, where you are, but we all need to really build this movement, be leaders of this movement. And then just as they did in the city of Allentown, people can vote this in.
John Olson, you put in the chat, captured agencies and institutions by the mega corporations seem to be the norm. How can this be undone without dismantling the system in total? John, do you want to develop that or throw it to Alanna
Okay,
for
a little bit,
comment?
a little bit. I've got the fan on it. Hope that isn't disturbing anybody with sound.
We hear you.
Okay, finally, we've had a cool spring in Maine. We're finally getting the heat that we were expecting 2 months ago. Anyway, it seems to me that the Georgist approach is excellent as a reform within the capitalist system, and yet how does that, how do we that address the other major contradictions within the capitalist system having to do with exploitation, both of people and of resources? It seems like a positive measure, but stops short of what's needed.
Alanna?
So
Exploitation, okay. Earth rights is both use and ownership. It's ownership and it's use. So a locality has zoning laws. So if a region or a people in a locality don't want extraction of their resources, I believe that's their sovereign right. In that, the most damaging resources for the environment are usually the energy resources. I think that making sure that those companies, when they do extract, are paying a full economic rent, a land rent, will actually help drive incentives towards renewable and even the free energy resources that are coming online. So again, it's sovereignty over the resource use decisions, John, as the second leg. There's two legs of the earth rights ethic. It's ownership and it's use. So we're bringing in the economic justice and there's the environmental component. We're emphasizing economics because it's not been emphasized. People know what the environmental movement is about. So we're saying both are important. You can use the Pigouvian taxes, the environment, the polluter pay taxes for also those concerns. But then one other thing, you say the capitalist system. Well, I think it's monopoly capitalist. It's a system that concentrates wealth in the hands of the few. We're talking about a free, fair market system. We're not anti-market. We're anti-market exploitation and the gifts of nature. But we're wanting labor and capital not to be in polarity and opposition. We're wanting labor and capital to be harmonic. I mean, okay, look, visualize it this way. If you're untaxing labor, you're increasing the purchasing capacity. I think that's a good thing. That increases demand so that labor can purchase more of their basic needs that are necessary. So untaxed wages. And then if you have access to land, not if there is significant access to a direct, affordable land, you can, remember the song, take this job and shove it. You don't have to employ in the capitalist system. You can self-employ. Once there's the capacity and the power for labor to self-employ, then we can form local-based co-ops and ownership of capital and proliferate small businesses.
And I see in your question here, John, the rub, in other words, and I think Carol described it as well. It's these captured agencies, the government, captured by the mega corporations that like the way that things are right now. And this is a movement that hopefully can inspire enough people to pressure our representatives to do right by us. And boy, is that going to be a heck of a fight. I'm going to go to Amir and then Wendell and then Ruth. Amir, you wrote ESG. The, God, what does that stand for? I forget. Is used as
Environmental
a green,
and
sustainable, no, ESD? Well, whatever.
ESG, no, environmental
Yeah, sustainable
and
goals, those goals.
Sustainable, I think.
Right.
sustainable governance.
Is used as a green
Yes.
flag under which elites purchase land in Ireland to avoid taxes and earn green brownie points that they can monetize in various ways. Explain that a little more, please.
Yeah. Well, this is to support what was it done in Ireland. The price of land is going up, doubling in many cases. Marginal land that is getting good money, and it's partly mostly driven by the fact that the EU supports the ESG goals and has backed that with funding from the European Investment Bank, and in Ireland supports it also with investment from our government pension funds. So if you say you're going to convert, say, clearfell forestry of non-native species into continuous cover forestry with mixed native species, right? And this has happened. And you're a very wealthy family, or indeed a wealth fund. You can go to the European Investment Bank and you can borrow money at very little percent. I know the interest rates have gone up, but at the lowest rate. And you will get also funding from the Irish government to buy that land in order to convert it to continuous cover, which is what we should be doing anyway. And all they do is basically cut the trees, the most mature trees is along, and there's natural regeneration. And they will be able to monetize that in terms of carbon credits. But also in Ireland, anything they sell, the land and the wood, when they sell it later, there's no capital gains tax on it. But far more important than that, as Duncan was saying, is that they're able to pass on that value to their descendants with no capital acquisition tax, which is no wealth taxes, no inheritance taxes at all. And that has driven up the price of that land, which has very little value. It used to be about 2,000 or 3,000 an acre. They can offer more than 4,000 an acre because of the extra advantages, the carbon credits, the low interest loans, the capital that our own pension funds puts in at risk, first risk. So in other words, leveraged up, that can give quite a decent income over time. And that's what they're doing.
Is that the gist of what you wanted to share, Amir? Or
no, that's what I'm saying, how this works.
Okay.
You know, people were saying that the World Economic Forum is basically being captured by the wealthy elite, and they're using climate change at the moment and biodiversity crisis, etc., to make a land grab and further resource grabs. Now, what I want to suggest is we can fight them, yes, politically, but it's very hard to explain what's going on. The farmers are fighting it, but they're articulating it badly. Another option we have, which I think we should consider very seriously, is actually playing them at their own game, because a lot of these forests are owned now, or indeed they're moving the same way on suckler farmers, which is beef farmers, and I'm a suckler farmer. So they're saying that the cattle are dangerous to climate change, which I contest, and I've been in the environmental movement for years, and there's a lot of science that says otherwise, certainly on marginally hilly land. But what we could do is form cooperatives. The only thing that stops us getting access to that cheap funding and that funding from the state and maximizing the value of the carbon credits and being able to maximize the value of the tax advantages is the fact that we're all separate. It's all separately owned in Ireland, the land, for the most part, is distributed. If we came together, we would be able to play them at their own game, because we can show stronger social goals. The money would be recirculated locally, whereas if it's foreign elites, the money goes straight out. And there's no reason for them to maximize the jobs involved. Whereas if it's local, 40 farmers get together, 40 million value is easily done. That's the minimum you need before you can go to the ESG. You can play them at their own.
Are you are you ready to hear Alanna's response, or Henry? You know, the Georges, is that consistent with the
that?
Georges?
Is consistent with the Georges view, yes, because you're forming a land trust, and you're working essentially to capture the land value and all of the various advantages for the community, and you're demonstrating the value of a land tax. I think we will need an agricultural land tax as well, but you can, instead of waiting and giving away agency by expecting the politicians to do it, we can move and learn and educate at the same time by working in parallel. I actually think you will still need a land tax to put an engine behind it.
Alanna, do you know Amir, and is that consistent?
I know
with...
Amir very well. I love Amir. She's beautiful. She's our vice president for Ireland for the International Union for Land Value Tax. She's written great books. She understands the interface with the land, money problems, etc. Now, Amir, you know, you started a lot of projects. It's a brilliant idea. Write it down, but you're the one who's going to have to do it in Ireland.
I know, I'm committed. I'm committed. I'm just going to do it I'm going to look at that for one county in Ireland, Westmeath. And I've already begun to get some allies and collecting the information. I'm going to an auction tomorrow about this. Alanna will keep us posted. Alanna, just one more point. I also sent you the link to the talk I gave 2 years ago now on how to make housing affordable in a high value area, even without a land tax. And this is the area where I live here in Dublin, Renal or Rathmines, high value area, where originally the whole area was developed on building leases, and the landlords held the ground rent and you paid for the ground rent. But it was actually a brilliant way of very quickly building, because the builders, and they were the first Catholic entrepreneur developers in the city, got access to essentially to land through this system. And
Amir,
they developed themselves into a middle class. But I just want to explain that you can separate the land out again, put it in trust, fund the land element very cheaply, and make the building affordable again. And then you ESG goals to get the cheap funding to do up the buildings. But I've done a long and rather rambly, I have to say, video on that, and I've given the link to Alanna there. I sent, I hope on my.
So listen, I didn't draw out the community land trust, but the community land trust movement came from Henry George economics and from the National Fund in Israel to hold the land in trust, which also interfaces with George's. So we're all for community land trust.
And as I moderate the passion and the information that our presenters can present, I have to defend and intervene on behalf of audience who want to participate. Wendell, it's your turn to unmute and share with us.
Thank you. A piece of pure economic analysis that comes out of the George's analysis is that when you tax land value, it drives the market value of land down. If you tax land value to, for example, if we, the entire land rent is created by the communities, so it really belongs to the community. And we're talking about taxing land value at a 100% of its rental value per year.
Ideally, yeah.
And that's just the ideal. What would happen to land value? The market value of land would be theoretically driven down to zero. The land value tax is not just one thing. It's not just increasing the tax on land value. It's reducing the taxes on labor and capital. People have got to be clear that it's in their interest, which I am for 100%. I would give up in a heartbeat my ability to profit from ownership of the land that I own, as long as you didn't tax my home, as you didn't tax my wages, as you didn't impose these other taxes. There is a quid pro quo. But so here we are talking land value taxation in America, which was founded on grabbing the land for the purpose not only of having a place to be productive, but to emulate the English landlords who enclosed the commons. Why did they do that? Because they wanted to be able to cash in on this unearned income from ownership of the land.
Thank you, Wendell.
So enough said. You could that alone is why we're called communists. Except that anybody who says that we're communists, well, you're taxing the heck out of labor and capital.
Pejoratively, we're off of the box, off, right, and left. So
you can't win. Left.
Yeah, we can, but
I want to invite Ruth to comment, and then if there's time, I want to touch base with the new chats that are in the chat. Ruth, how are you?
I'm fine. Good to see you, Bruce, and
Too.
everyone. Mine is mostly a question. First of all, I am digesting all of this. It's very more complex than you realize for somebody who doesn't really have this as a study. But one of the thoughts that I'm having is the extreme greed of monopoly capitalism. The fact that and interest rates, and how it is that interest rates, it's almost like a land base. It makes money a land base in itself, because money becomes a land that actually creates profit. And what I feel like I'm watching in the world we're in is this system is something that winds up, it's like an Ouroboros, it winds up eating itself. And we're in the end stages of this monster actually consuming itself in its motivation to own everything, and it's here. So, but I want to understand how this land-based tax system will be able to interface with this interest, which becomes a way that money becomes land in itself. Because what I'm seeing is, I would love for this greed to be dispelled.
Alanna, what's your take on that?
The greed gets dispelled when we have a clarity around just land and money systems. The only reason keeping the greedy people in power is because the people aren't, they're being divided. And what we're doing right now is a way forward beyond the division. Humanity is one in its claim to Mother Earth. Now, question about land and money. Let's take, for example, the Public Banking Institute with the one example of the Bank of North Dakota. So North Dakota is putting its tax dollars into that nonprofit bank. And so it enables low interest loans. So nonprofit banks are not, they're just that. They are extremely low interest loans for the public good. And so that's the interface. You put your land value tax dollars into your local public bank, then that is available as funding for interest-free loans for the city for infrastructure and interest-free mortgage loans for housing. So there's a wonderful conversation we're going to have. Just an answer to your question: how can the land and money movements work together? What's the models? What's the examples to bring justice and fairness to both these institutions, and how they would work in a cooperative, synergistic manner? Help us do that.
Unless anyone's got something urgent to declare, I'll go around with our presenters for their final thoughts.
Well, I want to emphasize what I actually said before, that I think that what we have with Honey Fitz connection to JFK is an incredible opportunity. And so this requires that, it's a we need a strategy to break through, to get people's attention. Everything that everyone's talking about here is how difficult it is to get people's attention, to listen carefully enough to get it. Okay, because once people get this, they're going to do it. It's that simple. It's that simple, but they have to get it. And that's what's important. And I think coming out of the mouth of Honey Fitz is a very good start.
Dennis Kucinich is a good guy.
Yeah.
And he's approachable, and he is on the right track. And
Get it to him.
He'll listen to what you have to say, and he'll act on it.
Especially you, Alanna, because you
Yeah.
know him personally.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
When Dennis,
get it
when
going.
Dennis was congressman, he called me once at 9 o'clock in the evening to thank me over and over again for reminding him of the importance of Henry George.
Well,
Okay.
there you
So,
are.
when he
okay.
reads this, when he reads what Honey Fitz
Yeah,
said
it's gonna
on
go.
the public
I-
record,
It's gotta
it.
work. It's
that's
gotta.
going to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to
Wow.
thank all 25 of you from 6 countries for your time and attention to this. Keep asking those great questions. Keep thinking this through. There's lots of resources you can learn more from. And then please consider that you be instrumental in starting and leading your own project where you live. We could connect you with others where you live, perhaps. But let's just do this. We got to go. There's books and books and articles about this policy written over 100 years. That's not enough. There has to move from the academic great idea to actual responsibility, that if not me, who? If not now, when? So please, we have Earth Rights projects. We can guide you through it. We can give you expert consultancy. Hopefully we'll be raising some funding to give even more seed funds, of which we've given to 4 projects now through the IU. So projects implementation is where it's really at. Please consider. Thank you again.
Thank you. And Kris, before I hand it to you, Vanessa, I want to invite you for any final thoughts.
It was nice to be able to be involved as more than just listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. Kris Millegan.
Okay, so again, thank you everybody for spending some time. And, Alanna made a very, very important point here, because the biggest way that, quote unquote, the powers that be get their way is by making us fight each other. Okay. And, the point about, the Georgist and what we're talking about brings capital and labor together. They shouldn't be opposing like that. We can all work together on here, because, we've got a lot of changes going to be happening here. We've got AI and all of this thing that the powers that be are going to try and monopolize in their favor. Okay, and we need to stand up as people. We need to talk about this with our friends. We need to, go to city council meetings, go to county meetings, talk to your state senators. We have to talk about this beyond this group. So again, the thing that needs to happen is, we need to stand up and take responsibility for ourselves and for our children, and move the world forward in a better way than it is. And, vote too. I'm going to tell people to vote. That's it.
Now you've got to yell onward.
Onward to a better future.
Thank
Thank
you,
all,
everyone.
everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kris. Thank you.
Thank you.